here. We're ready. For the viewers at home, I'm making coffee on the fly so I don't make Chris wait any longer. So if you see me looking down doing this, that's what I'm doing. But let's do this intro really quick. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Mid Curve. Don't know what episode it is. Doesn't matter. We're here with Chris. He's been on the podcast before. Actually, I haven't even released that one yet. That's how busy I've been. We did record one before with you and Zano, and it was great. But let me, before we get this kicked off, because I haven't released that one, give yourself an intro and make it the best intro ever.
What's up? I'm Chris, aka Lil Perp.
Hold on. How did you come up with that name? Is that your rap name?
It's kind of a long story. We were brainstorming names for Drift, and I joked around that we should call it Lil Perp X because every exchange ended with an X, and then I just dropped the X and made it my Twitter handle. It just stuck with it. But I do love rap and hip hop, so I was also like, this kind of this fits in with my aesthetic, so I just ran with it.
Not to derail this already, but who's your favorite? Who's your favorite rapper?
That's probably like Biggie or Jay-Z or Nas.
Really?
Like my favorites.
Okay. I mean, Biggie, Nas. Not a fan of Jay-Z, but I mean Nas for sure.
What about you? What, you're gonna disrespect me by saying Jay-Z sucks?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you. I'm not a fan of Jay-Z. It's cool.
I think he grew on me over time, honestly. He grew on me. I didn't like him growing up, and then post 20 years old, I liked him for some reason.
I could see that. I mean, for sure, like Nas and Biggie, like some of the greats. I'm gonna say for me, it's MF Doom. I love MF Doom. Nipsey. I'm West Coast guy, so
interesting.
Nipsey's my boy. I also say, just had another one. I mean Kendrick.
Yeah, Kendrick's great.
Kendrick's up there. But
honestly, anyone who likes MF Doom is usually pretty smart. So that's pretty bullish for you. Like no one dumb even knows who MF Doom is. So I feel like that's good.
If you actually go through and analyze MF Doom's lyrics, like the only one that even comes close to him is Eminem. Like I've seen analysis of like the lyrics and how each word ties back to certain words and how there's like rhymes within rhymes. And like I'm not a music guy. I don't know too much about music, but when I just know that I liked MF Doom. I liked his flow and his like storytelling ability. And then I like randomly stumbled upon these videos where they were like real, like people who actually understand music were breaking down both the lyrics from like Eminem and MF Doom. And there's all these like, musical terms for it that I don't understand or know, but it was just impressive. Like it's crazy. So anyway, sorry, we're already like way off topic, but I like rap and I like hip hop too. So
yeah,
but yeah, man. Okay, so finish up with this intro.
Yeah, so my day job is being co-founder for Drift Protocol, DeFi protocol in Solana, one of the OGs, and then I'm an aspiring philosopher part-time on Twitter, where basically sometimes I like talking about books, which is like I guess how we got into this podcast.
Yes, I kind of noticed that like your tweets are meta. Some of them are they're like, I love Twitter because you get these armchair philosophers on here, but like a lot of guys are like really smart, and it's funny because there's always like an undertone of cynicism or sarcasm to like the crypto philosophers, right? Which I like because I'm a cynic. Actually, that's that's one of my Discord names is Cynic. So yeah, anyway, I'm not really a cynic, but I like to pretend to be a cynic.
That's kind of like the vibe of the age, It's better to be funny and cynic than cringe and optimistic. But anyway.
Yeah. It's true, but I always say I'm a I'm like a pessimist. I'm really an optimist posing as a pessimist. And but I don't know. I think I used to be a pessimist, and then over time as I got older, I became more optimistic and bullish humanity. But that's like, I guess that's for another time.
That's for a deeper podcast, but I like that.
Yeah, that is for a deeper podcast. So I this actually, you hitting me up to talk about books came at a fortuitous time because I told you this already, but I'm gonna tell the viewers, like I really want to build a community here that builds better founders and brings more people in, right? But I think the way that you bring more people in is that you build better founders. And that I think that's the foundation, right? And that, I think for me, that's mindset, that's marketing, that's business, that's just understanding your craft better. And so having people like you on who have actually done something and have some thoughts on this, I think is perfect. It's like a perfect time, right? So today, what we wanted to do was, and this is actually Chris's idea, is to talk about some books that all tech bros need to know and need to read. and this is by no means, I don't think like either of us are claiming that this is the comprehensive list of books that you should read. But it's just a few that we like. But yeah, I'll let you take it. Should we just jump in?
Well, I'll just say that I tried to pick books that at least hopefully one of them you hadn't heard of, and if you read it would be good.
Yep.
So slightly esoteric, but not too esoteric, where it's like no one's actually going to read the book. So that was kind of what I was working backwards from.
That's actually my thought as well. I picked some like kind of obscure books that maybe you haven't heard of, or maybe a little out there and weird, but yeah, I thought it'd be interesting. So like, I think from your side, you tell me. I'll say from my side, the books that I picked are focused on marketing and more like community building style books, because that's kind of my area. And for you, what was your like kind of niche, you think?
I think I was just trying to pick books that I'm like, this has a good concept that I think is important for like founders or builders to kind of be aware of and
Right.
try to like apply just in terms of the way they think about like developing a business.
Man, I'm actually really excited for this. I'm
Me
excited
too. Me too. Me too. This is my favorite pod already.
yeah, this is great. It's just the boys talking about books and philosophy, and that's great. And like, I don't know if you can see, but like this bookshelf over here goes like this whole wall, and then back here, and I have all my sections. So we could do a lot of like this whole section back here is just Russian literature. Then
That's
I
crazy.
have business up top, I have philosophy, I have like, just there's all like travel, there's a bunch of stuff. So we could do this podcast quite a few times. I feel like we could just like cycle through some books. Anyway, okay, first book. Go for it.
Okay, my first book that I picked is Alchemy of Finance by George Soros. So this is definitely canon and like the like financial philosopher like bookshelf. So this book is famous for introducing Soros' idea of reflexivity, which is this idea that there's a feedback loop between expectations and reality. So he really like kind of brought this idea out because it informed how he invests. So he's or traded. So he's one of like these very successful traders, made billions of dollars, and he's like unique because whereas like maybe the more traditional model is like efficient markets, like prices reflect underlying reality. His whole thing was people's expectations of the future and what they see the price as actually loops back in to affect like the fundamentals of the business, which then loops back in and affects the price. So he identified these self-fulfilling and self-defeating processes in markets and kind of explain like bubble phenomena using the idea of reflexivity. Um, and I think although he talked about it in the finance, like that, like in the field of finance, I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to understand this idea because there's a big part of like the entrepreneur's job is to basically um, like influence everyone else's expectations around them about the future growth. Because when you're starting a company, you have literally nothing, right? So it's like, how are you going to convince people to come work for you? How do people convince people you're going to try your product, to invest in you, etc. So what you actually have to do is you have to be so confident and have this like sure expectation of growth in the future that other people kind of buy into it, actually come and join your team. And by doing that and by having those expectations, you actually like kind of manifest and the business actually grows, which then lets you to like push the expectations even more. And there's this like self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think really grokking that idea of the feedback loop between expectations, reality, really important for the entrepreneur.
So you kind of answered, I had a few questions written out for each book. You kind of like knocked them out already. So like my first question was like, how does the theory of reflexivity differ from efficient market hypothesis? Can you maybe like go over that one more time?
Yeah. So the idea of efficient market hypothesis, I would say, is like, there's this business world going on. Businesses are generating profits and revenue or whatever. And then investors are monitoring it and then basically accurately pricing what's going on in like the business world. And it's almost this idea of like the markets are providing an accurate representation of what's going on in the real world, but it's just perfectly reflecting it, right? There's no like feedback loop between the two, and that's how you get this idea of efficient markets, where it's like um, the market is accurately like pricing in all possible information, and whatever the current price is the best possible price because everyone is like feeding in information.
Futarchy.
Yeah. But anyone who's like really participated in, especially crypto, and like thinks about it, and it's like the markets are always trending in one direction. It's never stable. Like this idea is obviously crazy.
Yep.
And so Soros basically just explains like what's going on there, where price starts going up. There's ways that like prices going up can actually influence the fundamentals of the business. So an example of this might be like for Solana, there's a lot of reflexivity where the price of Solana, the token, going up leads to there being more like economic activity on Solana, which then causes the price to go up even more. And it creates these like feedback loops that create growth. And Soros really just talks about that very like clearly, and how prices and the fundamentals like loop into each other.
That's right. And I saw that, like, I worked for venture in Hong Kong early on, my crypto journey. And I would see this actually in, startups all the time, where it's kind of like a fake it till you make it thing. There's like this expectation that you're going to be big. So you act like you're big. So people believe it. So the price goes up or valuations go up, which gives you the ability to actually become big. So they're like, I saw it firsthand play out, and it was actually really, really interesting. Of course, you don't want to like lie about things. And that's what what was that girl's name that tried to be like Steve Jobs and did like the blood?
Uh, it's what is it? Theranos or whatever.
Bernays? Yeah. She kind
Yeah.
of got caught up in the fake it till you make it thing a little too much, committed fraud. You don't want to take it that far, but
Well, I think that's also a good lesson. Is like some people basically don't push the expectations enough, and then some people can tilt it way too far. So there's like an art to an entrepreneur of pushing it, but not pushing it so far that it basically pops.
it comes back to just balance in all things in life. Another conversation for another time. Do you know Soros's big trade that he's famous for?
Oh yeah, he broke the Bank of England.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep.
Uh,
Just shorted it almost to death. But yeah, that was cool. But I mean, that's like where his famous quote. He talks about it in some of his books. But like his quote is like, "When I see a bubble, I buy in," which is like probably the best trading advice for crypto, and it's kind of like guided my trading, I guess, over the years. It's like when you see a bubble, like you just kind of buy into it and ride it for as long as you can. Um, I have another question for you on this one before we move on. Um, I guess we actually kind of already answered this one as well, but also I don't want to do that one again, but I'll do this one. How does Soros's risk or approach to risk taking and uncertainty differ from like conventional risk taking strategies? Do you know?
I would say he's really like a trend follower,
Mm,
where you probably, from a more orthodox view, you would expect things to be more mean reverting. So like
it's like the
if you're in,
bubble, right?
yeah, he's gonna chase a bubble, and because he feels more confident in how it works, he thinks he can exit before other people's. Basically, he's gonna play like a little bit of greater fool theory and be
Yeah.
like, I can exit first, but I know this will keep going. Where either someone's probably too risk averse and they're cutting winners too fast, or they don't realize something is a bubble and they're like kind of a naive believer, which
Yeah.
honestly happens a lot of people in crypto where they don't understand the reflexivity, so they don't realize like, oh, it's 22 Bitcoin can go from like 70 to 16 and I should
Mhm.
hedge. So there's also a lot of like people probably focus on what he says about the bubble on the way up, but in terms of risk management, it's like you should be thinking about, okay, what happens when the reflexive loop unwinds, and make
That's
sure
right.
I get out of dodge, basically.
Because reflexivity works both ways. It works on the way down too, and then accelerate.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that part, but yeah, that it does.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, enough of that guy. I think okay, so I'll do one book really quick. We don't have to spend much time on it. My first book for building communities is called Propaganda by
Mm,
by Edward Bernays. And Edward Bernays was, I believe, the nephew of Freud. Um, but he is like the godfather of modern marketing.
mm,
Um, he worked on like a lot of campaigns. So he like one campaign he worked on was actually the smoking campaign, like marble smoking cigarette campaign. When it was starting to go down and people were saying it's unhealthy for you, he brought it back and he got women smoking. So he saved that industry. He also okay, I'm not saying everything this guy did was great. He helped topple the Guatemalan government because like fruit producers in the states wanted to keep prices cheap. So again, not great. But the book is interesting in if you use it for the right purposes, which is like building communities, right? So he talks about public opinion and how it's shaped by influencers. He talks about like I took notes on this so I wouldn't forget what I was going to talk about. So I'm kind of like reading off my notes. He talked about like concepts of like how you control communication channels, and he talks about like tailoring messages, like everything to specific groups of people. But it is really interesting if you read the book, like how he went about like manipulating large groups of people like Guatemala and like starting a coup there just to keep prices cheap. So anyway, that's one of my books. I
mm.
use it not obviously for nefarious purposes, but just like when I was starting out in marketing, like how do you use certain voices to shape public opinion or get your message out there? Because that's what marketing actually is. It's like teaching people what or yeah, like teaching people what you're selling or what you're doing in an interesting way and getting your message out there to the most amount of people possible and then converting those people into being either in our case users but maybe like consumers in other people's cases, right? So yeah, top one of my top books for marketing.
Do
Okay.
you think just what you're saying about is like key opinion leaders or whatever?
Leaders.
Like, yeah, he wasn't a certain. I don't know. It sounds like the book's a bit older, but
It
do you
is
feel
old.
like it plays even harder with social media now?
It does. It's so yeah, it's weird because this book was written a long time ago. I mean, he was, early 1900s or whatever, but the strategies that he uses, we still use today. I mean, obviously, like he's the godfather of modern marketing, right? He used a lot of Freud's um, philosophies and thoughts to shape his philosophy and strategy, and that stuff still plays out. like he was using influencers before they were influencers. Now, because we have social media, those influencers can propagate a message much quicker to like far greater people. But also, the message can get squashed a lot quicker as well, right? So like when he was like trying to influence the Guatemalan government, the American people had no idea what was happening down there. But now, if you have like influencers trying to influence like Venezuela, for example, we all know that's happening. You can find out that's happening immediately if you're looking in the right places, right? So I think there's good and bad with it. Like there's more checks and balances, but at the same time, I don't know, like bad messages can get spread quicker as well, right? Like the hot terms these days, like misinformation and disinformation gets spread very quickly. But yeah.
Interesting. I never heard of that book. That's
Yeah.
I'm definitely adding that to my list.
I have some weird ones like that. So like I like to study
That's awesome.
I like to
I
study
love that.
cults and propaganda. So my great grandfather was from Italy. He moved to the States and then he went and he fought in World War II, watched Mussolini hang. And it's like, or like get drugged through the town square, right? And so like as an Italian fighting for the Americans, going back and watching this dictator, get hung, that always fascinated me. What really fascinated me about all that was the propaganda that they used, like both Hitler and Mussolini. Like, how do they get these people to like buy into what they were selling, which was, terrible. But you get this like mass movement by using certain tactics, and like I think you can use certain tactics for good as well, obviously. Or certain marketing strategies for good, right? Like we want to build cults, but we want to build positive cults that help people not only help themselves but help other people, right? So that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah.
By the way, when I commented on your book, someone said something about Nietzsche, and I said like that fake Zarathustra is trash. I actually can't stand Nietzsche, and I wanted to say like that was like the one book that Hitler gave Mussolini was that book, and
Really?
like, it influenced both of their philosophies heavily because it's all about power.
You could definitely read Nietzsche and just be like complete megalomaniac. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's when actually when you like commented on something I said about that and you knew a lot about it, I was like, oh, this MF reads for sure.
So
But
here's my favorite quote about Nietzsche, and it's actually from one of my favorites. His name's Chesterton, and he wrote this. Oh man, he was so witty, but he wrote this chapter, and he just tore apart both Nietzsche and Tolstoy, and he likened them, and he like juxtaposed them with Joan of Arc. And it was so good the way he did it. In the one sentence, I've told everyone this, I've told the Jito boys this, but the one sentence he has is like, if Nietzsche wouldn't have ended in imbecility, Nietzscheism would have ended in imbecility, because there either has to be a softening of the heart or a softening of the head. And Nietzsche chose the latter, because Nietzsche went crazy in the end, right? And I was like, that quote always hits so hard for me because I'm like pretty stubborn, growing up. And I just thought to myself, man, like this guy, he gets it. Like you either like soften your heart or you just go crazy and your mind just goes nuts. And Nietzsche like refused to give up on some of his beliefs. And like, but the one thing I will say, sorry, I'm just like going off on this. Like,
no, I like it.
Truth. There is one truth in that speaks there third show that I really like. And it's the famous quote, like God is dead. He says, God is dead. We painted the sky red with his blood. Who's given us the authority to kill God, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when Nietzsche said that, he wasn't saying it victoriously. He was saying it with like in mourning, because he realized that when you kill the highest good, when you kill God, humans will inherently replace that with something. And generally we replace it with ourselves. And that's not a good thing, because we're, fallible. We're imperfect, and we're broken. And when you replace God with a broken God, it never ends up well.
Yeah. I think the reason I think I like the existentialist Nietzsche. I also read some Camus. Honestly, I think I like
Yeah.
Myth of Sisyphus more than anything Nietzsche wrote because it's easier to read and it was more like I think that hit me harder. But I was reading those books kind of when I was starting to realize like religion isn't the like or not even religion like there is just no like kind of metaphysical answers to your life. And then I
Yeah.
think they really wrote about that in a time where that was like the zeitgeist, people figuring it out. And just like the existentialist response to be like, it kind of doesn't matter and you need to go create the meaning in the world
Mhm.
that you want to like imbue it with was, I thought, really like powerful answer to that, which
Mhm.
is why I like them. It's very like creative, like kind of like maybe there's no one answer or like one meaning, but it's up to you to like go put that in the world, whatever,
Mhm.
however you see fit, and like just kind of deal with the absurdity of it. So that's why I like the existentialist.
Yep. And I think that's why a lot of people like the existentialists. I'm going to take the opposite side of that coin, but that's again for another podcast.
Okay, okay.
I will disagree with that. I like short note. The existentialist has led to nihilism, I think, in my opinion, and like our society is worse off because of Marx, Nietzsche, Camus, and Jean Paul Sartre are like the four. Maybe even Heidegger would be in there too. But we're gonna argue that on another podcast.
This is volume 2. Now you have to sign. You have to come back.
We haven't even gotten to the second book yet, man. Let's let's
Let's keep it going.
yeah. Okay. So second book.
Okay. Now, thank you for reining that in. Um, my second book is called Virtual Economies. It's a book about basically like how to design economics into video games. So I don't know the authors' names, but it's by some professors who like economics professors, and they would basically just went into like the basic building blocks of markets and how they apply to video games. And so basically, anyone building a digital, like some type of digital or software product, you're probably building something similar to a video game. And so there's just like a lot of interesting mental models in there to think about and apply to your business. I think probably the most powerful one is this idea of like basically like what's your content emission schedule? Like how are you keeping your users engaged, and how are you basically giving them new contact and to interact with? Um, and you see this in crypto basically like the content is usually like new markets, new tokens, new things to trade. Um, but yeah, even I've actually heard Tolly recently talking about content a lot too, as like the main differentiator for blockchains. And honestly, you might have read this book, but I think it's really useful for people that are building these like online systems to think about like, oh, how does video game how have the people who've been building video games the most engaging things that humans have ever built? Like what are the mental models they're using?
Yeah. What? So what are the authors? Do you know or remember what the authors like predict about like virtual economies in the future and like what role they're gonna play? Do they talk about it being like the actual economy, like virtual economies run everything, or what do they say about that?
There, it's very not like super philosophical. Like, oh, how this is going to influence the world. It's just like these are like it's almost like a textbook.
Okay.
Like these are the building blocks you should know. I know they talk about at the end that's like we're in this world where people are like kind of disenfranchised with the current systems. There's a lot of concern about climate change, et cetera. And like virtual economies basically allow for us to like innovate and experiment with new institutional designs. And it's also like you can channel some of the materialism that's maybe accelerating climate change online where the like you don't get the same like negative effects on society. So they do a little bit of like speculation at the end, but it's more like this is like a textbook. Like here's a mental model for you how to think about like what gives something value. Is it like to do social status signaling, or is it because it has some actual practical utility? Talks about the content cycle, talks about like a bunch of different things that like you can just kind of put into your tool belt when thinking about designing systems.
Yep. That's cool. That's cool. When I was working for Venture, we funded this company that was doing like it was like an AR company. And they were mapping cities, and like you could put these glasses on. It was really cool. You could like walk around the city, and it was all open source, so people could build whatever they wanted in that city. But like one of the examples he gave was like if you want to like buy stuff, you know, you could be walking around with these glasses on, someone just sitting there on the street corner selling you something. They're not actually there, but they are there in like, you know, augmented reality. And then you could pay in Bitcoin. You could get your information that way or whatever. And I thought that was like pretty sweet.
Yeah,
I don't actually know what happened to that company.
that sounds like some Snow Crash
Yeah.
shit. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't, but I know what it's about. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
similar.
awesome.
Yeah. Okay, where's another book? Here it is. I have like piles of books around here. My second book. This is Marketing. Seth Godin, one of the greats, one of the goats. Like if Bernays was like, you know, the original Godfather, this is like the modern Godfather of marketing. Work with like every big company you can think of. Now, I won't. It's obviously about marketing. I'm not going to talk about like the whole book, but the one thing that I took away from this book was that he kind of mentions that like people don't want to be told what they only want their beliefs reaffirmed, right? So when you're marketing to people, you have to figure out how to reaffirm what people already believe, and you have to go after your niche. So he says like find small dedicated audiences that you can speak to and then reaffirm their beliefs. Those audiences will then become your, you know, disciples, and they will proselytize to the rest of the world. But that's how you start. That's like my one key takeaway from this book. And it's true, like just to like from life experience, like trying to tell people what to believe is really hard. People are pretty stuck in their own beliefs, right? But they can connect with you almost immediately and jump on what you're trying to like either sell or do whatever if you're reaffirming what they already believe. Another thing that he talks about is like finding an enemy or creating like an us versus them kind of situation when you're marketing is always very powerful. And then I actually wrote down like, let's see, there's like 16 like key things that he says in this book. I'm not going to go through all of them right now. So anyway, if you want to read the book, it's a really good one for like people who are like trying to grow, like just good growth. Good growth.
One guy that works for a team in crypto and was like kind of behind some of their strategy one time said to me like the two pillars of like marketing or influencing are one, confirmation bias,
Yep.
and two, narrative violation.
Yeah.
And when he said that to me, it just like broke my brain because it's like literally those are the two things that get the most engagement.
Yeah.
Either you reaffirm like whatever your tribe is bullish on, or you go and you basically try to like say something so drastic that it jars people.
Yeah. I mean, we're all in this loop, right? And it's just like until someone says something crazy. It's why Tony Robbins cusses in his talks. I heard him talk about it one time. It's because like saying like cursing while you're talking like breaks people out of the loop. It like snaps them back into paying attention to you. Similar thing when you're saying, you know, aggressive and contradictory things, right? To the bias. People will like wake up and pay attention to it. And then like people use the whole like rage bait strategy where they just try to outrage people on Twitter. I'm never going to do that. It's just not me. I don't think it's productive. But it gets views. I mean, it's productive in that sense. Overall, it's not a productive strategy for me. So
I hate when someone's trying to do that, trying to mimic like a big account. I'm like, come on, bro, just chill. Like I know you've seen other people get really big accounts dunking on people, but can we not do this?
Can we not do that? Please. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so your third book, go for it.
Oh, my third book is Working in Public.
Okay.
It's a book by I think her name's Nadia, but she basically like kind of does like a anthropological study of like open source developers and
Okay.
what it's like to be an open source developer in today's age, and just kind of like walks through how like there's these minority groups of people that are like building all this software. They have such a big platform and kind of what those dynamics are like. I think the interesting thing about the book that I really took away from is just how much the developer can turn almost into an influencer,
Mm,
because so much of their work is public because they're like they have this platform to broadcast ideas. Um, and my main takeaway when I was just getting into crypto, and I was like, it's really important to try to basically like build in public, share what you're doing, interact, and like develop this kind of platform
mm,
to share with people. Um, and so I think if you're like a young dev, you should really try to, as much as possible to be able to share your work publicly, because there's a lot of like you should embrace being an influencer. You know, most developers don't think like I'm an influencer, but there's actually a lot of synergies there, especially when you're working on like open source type systems. I mean, probably the greatest example for people in the Solana ecosystem is like Armani, right? He went from being like this starting anchor to now he has like he's running this huge company that has a crazy NFT collection. So yeah, I think that's a really powerful book for developers who are maybe like, not really sure about like the working in public thing.
yeah. No, I agree. Um, I have two things on this, but the first thing I was going to say was, some of the most like powerful and effective marketing today is they're calling founder-led marketing, right? So I follow a few guys on YouTube who have companies, and their marketing is essentially just vlogs of their day to day, of like what they're doing as a founder, and they've become influencers on accident, almost, right? Like they're just blown up because people are interested in like what they're doing, what they think, etc. So I think you're spot on there that like sometimes it's hard for like the founder or the dev to do that. Obviously they don't have the time. They have other things to do. They're not interested in it, but actually it's pretty important for your company to have like a quote unquote thought leader, which is a terrible term, but just have like a figurehead, right? Or a hero figure for your company out there talking. Sam did that really well for FTX.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, they were committing crime, but the marketing stuff, like they were doing really well with him as like this, this leader kind of character, this like autistic leader or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
More positively, Buffalo from Jito is really good at that.
And I was
And
gonna
he's
say,
and he's the good guy. And he's the good guy.
yeah, yeah, nothing like Sam. Let's not put that there. But no, I love Buffalo, and I wish we're gonna release this vlog we did, which is like this kind of style with me and him just talking at a coffee shop about building Judo and all that. And I wish I could get him to do it more, but he's obviously very busy. So it is hard. It's just like a time commitment thing. Plus, we don't live in the same city, so it's that makes it even harder. But a question I have about this book is, like, did she talk about open source developers monetizing their work at all?
Trying to remember. Um, I think she does talk a little bit about like the influencer angle, where it's like if you develop, like if you're known for working on these things and it boosts your reputation, you can basically parlay that into really prestigious jobs at big companies that pay for this stuff. Like it's like any influencer, right? Like if you are well known for something, there's people that kind of coming back to your propaganda book are going to want to like be associated with you. So
Yeah.
um, I think if you're doing good open source work, you should try to share it, be comfortable like putting a face to it, and then that'll turn into speaking at conferences, getting jobs, etc. Finding good jobs, blah blah blah.
It's okay. So that actually leads into my next book, which is
Let's go.
like that was a good segue into this next book, which again, kind of weird. All these books is called The True Believer. and it is about the psychology behind mass movements. Again, what you were just saying is one of the main points of this book, which is that any mass movement has a charismatic leader or like figurehead. So like, siphoning or like kind of like shrinking that down into our little crypto bubble, like it's very, very helpful if you want your thing to become a movement to have a figurehead or like a hero figure kind of leading the way. The other point that I'll bring up about this book is that it's kind of I'm kind of reiterating what I said about the other book, but it's giving people a cause larger than themselves. That's another big key thing to do with your company. So I won't say much more about that one, but I think it's really interesting to learn about like just like mass psychology in general. So also kind of like a fringe book, but
I remember it got popular when Trump won.
Yeah.
2016. They started talking about it because they're like, he's a dictator, and they're like, or whatever. Because that's what that book was about. Like, he wrote. Did he write it because of the World War II, like authoritarians? Yeah.
I remember that too. That was funny. Trump is the funniest. I don't care like how you lean. I think Trump is one of the funniest presidents ever, and it just cracks me up. We won't get into Trump either. That's probably another podcast for next.
That's another pod. That's another
pod. Yeah, I think so. To sum that up, like, or that thought actually up, I just want to say, like, there's the old anecdote about the two philosophers that walk out of their house, look at the world, one cries, one laughs. And I think for me, I'm the you have to be the one that laughs. If you're the one that cries, you just get depressed, right? Because the world is so messed up. So in my case, I'm kind of an absurdist where it's just like everything is just so absurd. You have to find the humor in it. Otherwise, I would be a very, very depressed person. Okay. Anyway, on to your fourth. Are you ready? Your fourth? Yep.
Fourth. We're accelerating. We've got our tangents out the way.
Yeah.
My fourth book is Finite and Infinite Games. So this book is like written in like an aphoristic, almost poetic style.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a spiritual book. The quote I love from the book that like I would say kind of sums up the way I think about life is finite players play within boundaries, infinite players play with boundaries. And it's the whole book is kind of this idea of like finite players kind of take the world as is and kind of optimize in the rules of the game that they're given, and they like almost don't even realize they're playing the game. And the infinite player understands the games they're playing and also tries to create new games and change the rules of the games they're playing. And I think it just really does a good job of like basically describing kind of the creative path. And I think the entrepreneur, especially, their job is to create non-zero sum situations, new games, create wealth. And I think there's this aspect of it of like basically going outside the current meta and being willing to create something new. So I think it's really important that like you come to business with that mindset, because it's very easy to come at it with a zero sum mindset. Like there's just fixed pie. I got to increase my portion of the pie. But the ones I think that I respect the most are the ones that like create new games. And I felt like this book just kind of like summarized a lot of my worldview when I read it. So I think it's good to like share with people. Now a lot of people that work on Drift, I've shared the book with them. They read it and they kind of get where I'm coming from at like a more philosophical level. So yeah, I really recommend this book.
How does he talk about competition? Like how we should view competition if we're playing infinite games?
He kind of talks about how like the finite player is very concerned with competition. Like they really care about the score of the game they're playing, whereas the infinite player knows it's just one game, right? So they're going to be way less worried about like the current score of the current game they're playing. And I think, okay, you look at some of like the most successful people, like they're always like moving on to the next meta, and they probably don't even care if they come in first in the current meta, because they knew there's going to be a new meta where they want to be seen as like trustworthy, creative, upstanding. So yeah, I think being overly competitive is doesn't work in like if you're really playing the long term, because
And
then you might not build the allies you need for future games.
that's true. My dad my dad always said to me, now I don't even remember the exact quote, but he was like, you just need to take a mindset of abundance. Like business owners who have this abundance attitude always do better. And that's like an infinite game thing. If you're playing a finite game thing, you're looking at a zero sum game, right? Where people get like I'm just reiterating what you said, but people get very competitive and they look at it like that. But if you have this attitude of abundance, like you said, there's like the next thing, and the world is huge, and you have all these opportunities and all these pathways to take. And generally, when you do that, you also have better relationships with people because you're not always trying to take from them, but you're trying to work with them. And so anyway, that goes a long ways. And in my own life, I've built and sold 2 small businesses. I never looked at. I tried to take that attitude where I didn't look at competition as competition, but opportunity, and that helped me a ton. Okay, let's move on to. Do I have a few more books?
I think it's your number 4.
In my number 4? Okay. This one
But who's
is
counting?
this one's kind of a cool one. It's more for like the artists. It's more for like for the creative. But I love this book. It's called Steal Like an Artist.
Mm.
By Austin Kleon, I think. I don't know, but it's called 10 Things Nobody Ever Told You About Being Creative. And again, this is for like the marketing team, growth team. The main thing here is that nothing is new. Okay, so main thought is nothing is new under the sun. You can take inspiration from anyone. Now, of course, you need to make that your own. He's like not saying to like steal people's ideas, but the idea is to like, take all this inspiration in and morph it into your own thing, and then come up with your own strategy, your own creative, whatever. And I'm not going to go into it right now on this podcast. I think your books are more important. Having you talk is more important, but I think it is a really good like mindset book for creative people, and it's helped me a ton. Yeah, so I'll sum it up there.
Yeah.
I want everyone.
I feel like in the digital age, you just got to embrace remix culture. Like,
It's
just yeah, it's great. That's a great book, I think.
it's great. Okay, your 5th book.
Okay, last one is from Third World to First by
Okay.
Lee Kuan Yew, first Prime Minister of Singapore. We were just out in Singapore, so I'm like, let me get this in the mix. I think also like people talk about founder mode, they don't really know what it means or what it's supposed to mean. I think LKY is just went straight founder mode, and so he basically he went founder mode. Yeah, on a whole country. So I don't know. The first half of the book, he just kind of talks about how he thought about different things of while he's building the country up, like paying people working in government more, like making the city super green, trying to make sure it's super clean, like basically just walking you through all these design decisions, and how he's just really strict about it. And I think large part of being a founder is like kind of having these ideas and knowing going and like implementing them in the real world and like having conviction. And I think just like reading a book about how someone did it at the scale of a country is just super inspiring. And then going to Singapore, like driving by MBS, seeing like what he built is just like so crazy. And yeah, I think it's a great book for every founder to read.
Yep. Love Singapore. Um, didn't he talk about like even the small things like having AC? Didn't he talk about that? Was that book?
Yeah, like he was
Yeah.
very much like, how do we he was like kind of like, how do we turn Singapore into Switzerland or
Okay.
Israel of like Asia? So making sure like diplomats and people, foreigners come in, they feel super comfortable. So things like AC, it being clean, like a beautiful ride from the airport. Like he
Yeah.
was very like just meticulous on the details,
Yeah.
which is like really a lot of times being a founder is like getting in the details and being like, okay, let's make sure this is really good. And you see how he did that in the book, and that's how it became this like it's like the safe haven country for like all of Asia's like finance, right? And it's because he had that attention to detail.
Yep. I heard actually like Steve Jobs talked about this as well. It was actually like, it was some celebrity was talking about how he met Steve Jobs, and it was John Mayer. And he was talking about how Steve Jobs said, it's all about the details, like every little detail. If you get every little detail right, it will, you'll go so much further. So he's like, the font has to be right. This was Steve Jobs. So he's like talking about font and colors and sizing and like, the feel of it in your hands or whatever. Lee Kuan Yew did that, but just on the scale of a country. It's like the roads, the trees, the buildings, the greenery, the AC, like everything. He put all those like small details together, and he built this like country that runs like, Apple, basically, like a huge corporation. And it's pretty impressive. It's impressive.
I have a dev that's from Singapore, and I'm always just annoying him because I'm such a LKY simp. But I'm always like, "What would LKY do?" And he's just like, "Come on, stop talking about him so much." But it really is impressive.
Yeah, cool. Okay, my last book is not really a marketing book, more of a mindset book. Nassim.
Let's go NNT, baby.
Yeah. So the man is insufferable on Twitter. Hate him. If I just knew him from Twitter, I would hate him. But I read a lot of his books, and honestly, this one was kind of my favorite. I don't know why. I think it just resonated with me a little bit more than the others. I mean, like Anti-Fragile and the other ones, but Skin in the Game was good because I believe it's like a fundamental truth about incentives. Like you have to have skin in the game for you to be properly aligned with what you're doing. Let's say. So. And one example that he brings up, and I always love this example, is Hammurabi's code, which is funny because I just talked about this on the last podcast I did randomly with another guy. But if you don't know what Hammurabi's code is, you can actually go see it. I've seen it. It's in the Louvre in Paris, and it is like one of the first, I think it's Babylonian laws, and it's this stone pillar, and it's like all these laws are written onto this thing, and there are laws like, if a builder builds a house and the house collapses and kills someone's kid, the builder's kid is liable and he should be killed, basically. So like, what do you think that does to a builder? It makes him build a pretty good house, right? He's not going to like skimp on stuff because like, his children are now liable for his faults. So I think that there's something to be said about that, especially in what we do. I think that there should always be skin in the game. And in our industry, there's not always skin in the game. But when we're thinking about these things and like building companies and culture and all that, I think that this goes far. And I think it gives you clout. So like if you have skin in the game, your community sees that, they understand that, they intuitively know that you're here to do the best by the company and by them. It's much easier to build a hardcore cult. And that is my last thought on that.
Yeah, no, I think that book, I think so much of building in this space because it's kind of like it's like the Wild West, right? Is actually having a really good handle on incentives, skin in the game, structuring things such that you're aligned. Because if you don't do that, you're gonna get finessed or arbed. So it's really important, I think, to think about incentive design and aligning incentives with your partners. So it's a great book.
Yep.
I love NNT. I've read all his books like twice, even though he's insufferable. Yeah. I think I read Anti-Fragile first when I was in college, which was when when you read a book when you're really young, it really hits you hard. And I was like on the business consulting track and I read his book and I was like, this is how I want to live. You know what I mean? So I thought that's probably my favorite, but I like them all.
Yeah. Agreed. Anti-Fragile was the first one I read as well. I think it's his most famous one. Yeah. All right, man. What time are we at here? We're already at an hour. This is the longest podcast I think I've ever done.
We got good content.
We did get good content here. Let's sum this one up. I feel like we could probably do this again. I have a bunch of finance books that I want to go through, a bunch of Hayek, and some economists. There's one that I really love. Actually, it's called Money Free and Unfree, and really interesting. I won't get into it now, but essentially crypto used to exist in the fiat world. If you look at Scottish banking, like 1800s, or even wildcat banking in the States, people used to be able to issue, or states used to be able to issue their own money, right? And it was like a decentralized version of money. Okay, I'm already getting into it. I'm going to cut myself off.
I want to read that. That sounds fire.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to read something about that.
It is very, very, very interesting. I have a bunch of these like really interesting books, like Asian Financial Crisis. Russell Napier is another guy I like to read. Good economist. Really, he was around for the Asian financial crisis. He was in Asia, so like really interesting stuff there. Yeah, I have a ton. And then we could get into like Russian literature, like Solzhenitsyn and Dostoevsky, which is my favorite. Yeah, that's.
I don't know if I got as much range there as you do. I've read a little bit, but it seems like you got me trumped there.
I love Russian literature. I don't know why. I always joke, it's like people only read Russian literature to say that they read Russian literature, you know. But
yeah,
I actually do love Russian literature. And have you ever read the brothers Karamazov?
No.
Okay. It's a very long book by Dostoevsky, but thought to be one of the greatest novels ever written. Okay. So there's one chapter. If you just read the book, I mean, don't even read the book. You can read one chapter. It's called The Grand Inquisitor. And one of the brothers is telling another brother this story that he wrote or had a dream of. I don't remember. And it is like such a beautiful story. It's like a book within a book, right? And it is, and like there's three brothers. They represent like mind, body, and spirit, basically. And anyway, so if you ever get a chance, you should just read that chapter. And it's so good. Okay.
Yeah. Shout out my friend Maddie the Baddie, who's been reading a lot of Russian lit. So there's some Russian lit enjoyers on CT.
Okay, let's go.
Maybe you could do the pod with her.
Yeah. I would love to talk about that, because I mean, I'm not like a lit major or anything. I just do this like randomly for fun, but it's always good to get like people who are super, super deep into Russian literature. So like the last thing I'll say about Dostoevsky is, and one of the things that kind of drew me to him, was he had such a firm grasp on the undercurrent of society that he basically predicted what was going to happen to Russia, 50, 60 years into the future. And that was really interesting. The other interesting thing about him was he had these seizures. And so if you're into like psychedelics, you might know a little something about this, but these seizures gave him like vivid like hallucinations or visions, right? And I think like my personal theory is like that's what made him such a prophetic and prolific writer. As these visions. And he even said like he would have given up his whole life to have just one of these seizures. And so It was pretty interesting. Anyway, I'll keep rambling about this stuff. So let's wrap it up here.
Crazy.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
All right, we got more of these coming. If you're a bookworm on CT, reach out to us.
Yes,
we'll get you on.
That's a good idea. Have other people on, show their books that they're interested in.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. That'd be cool.
Okay, let's go.